The lights dim, the crowd erupts, and then he appears. Michael Jackson, dressed in his signature sequin jacket, a single white glove shimmering under the spotlight. With a glide that defies gravity, he moonwalks across the stage, and the world collectively gasps. He wasn't just a singer, he wasn't just a dancer. Michael Jackson was a phenomenon, a symbol of pop culture itself. From Los Angeles to Tokyo, his music transcended borders, language, and generations. Stadiums overflowed, millions of voices sang in unison, and billions of hearts beat to the rhythm of the king of pop. But even kings cast shadows. Behind the dazzling performances and record-shattering albums lay a man who seemed to be falling apart. His face, altered again and again by surgeries, became a mask. His behavior grew more erratic, his obsession with youth more unsettling. And then came the claims of child abuse within the walls of his Neverland ranch. To some, Michael was a victim of relentless media scrutiny and ruthless opportunists. To others, he was a predator hiding in plain sight. On the 25th of June, 2009, the unthinkable happened. Michael Jackson was gone. The world wept, but beneath the grief lingered an uncomfortable question. Who was he really? A misunderstood angel who never grew up, or a monster shielded by fame and fortune? But the truth behind Neverland is much darker. Michael Jackson was born on the 29th of August, 1958, in Gary, Indiana, a small, working-class town built around steel mills and factories. His family's home was cramped, a modest two-bedroom house that somehow held 10 children. Michael was the 8th child of the Jackson family, raised in a world where survival meant discipline, sacrifice, and ambition. His father, Joseph Jackson, was a strict, often harsh patriarch who worked at the local steel mill by day and pushed his children into music by night. To him, music wasn't just a passion, it was a ticket out of poverty. From the very beginning, Michael stood out. Even as a toddler, he mimicked rhythms, remembered melodies, and moved with a natural grace that seemed beyond his years. His mother, Catherine, recognized his gift and nurtured it with gospel influences, teaching him to channel emotion into his singing. But Joseph had a different approach. He drilled his sons relentlessly, transforming them into a performing unit known as the Jackson Brothers, and later the Jackson 5. For Joseph, mistakes were not tolerated. Rehearsals often ended in punishments. Stories of him using belts and switches to keep his children in line became infamous. Michael, barely 6 years old, was thrust into the role of lead singer. His voice carried a raw power, soulful and haunting despite his youth. Audiences were stunned. How could a child sing with such pain, such urgency? But behind that magic was fear. Michael would later confess in interviews that his father's presence terrified him, that even as an adult he sometimes felt sick just being around him. "I love my father," Michael once said, "but I don't know him." Fame came fast. The Jackson 5 skyrocketed in the late 1962 with hits like "I Want You Back" and ABC. Suddenly, the shy boy from Gary was on national television, his every move choreographed, his childhood stolen under the glare of spotlights. While other children played, Michael was touring, rehearsing, recording. He had become a child star, but he never had a childhood. The applause of millions could not erase the loneliness he felt when the curtain fell. The pressure to perform shaped him, but it also broke him. He learned early that love was conditional, that affection came when he sang perfectly, danced flawlessly, smiled on cue. Any misstep risked punishment or disappointment. This craving for approval, seated in his earliest years, would follow him throughout his life, driving him to impossible heights of artistry and impossible depths of insecurity. There were other scars too. Michael grew self-conscious about his appearance. His father reportedly mocked his nose, calling it ugly. Those taunts burrowed deep into Michael's psyche, and decades later, they would resurface in his obsession with cosmetic surgery. What the world saw as eccentricity had roots in the cruel words of his youth. And yet, even amidst the pain, Michael's talent blossomed. His childhood forged his artistry. The discipline, the obsession with perfection, the ability to channel suffering into music that could move millions. The boy who grew up under the shadow of fear learned to transform his emotions into sound and motion, creating performances that seemed almost supernatural. Still, the cost was steep. Michael never learned how to be simply a child, or later, simply a man. His formative years built the foundation of both his genius and his tragedy. In the crucible of Gary, Indiana, a star was born, but so too were the wounds that would haunt him forever. And as the Jackson 5 conquered charts and stages worldwide, one question remained. Could the little boy who sang with such soul survive the machine that created him? By the mid-1972nd, the Jackson 5 had already become household names. But Michael Jackson was different. Even among his talented brothers, he radiated a rare energy. His voice carried a depth of soul, his dance moves were electrifying, and his stage presence seemed almost supernatural. Everyone from Motown executives to screaming fans could see it. Michael wasn't just a member of the Jackson 5. He was destined to stand alone. His transition to a solo career began cautiously. In 1972, at just 13 years old, Michael released Got to Be There, showing the world that he could command attention without his brothers. But the true transformation didn't come until the late 1972nd, when he joined forces with legendary producer Quincy Jones. Together, they created an alchemy that would redefine music. In 1979, Off the Wall was released. With hits like Don't Stop Till You Get Enough and Rock With You, Michael merged disco, funk, and pop into something new, something alive. The album sold millions, earning him critical acclaim and a Grammy. But for Michael, it wasn't enough. He wanted to be more than a star, he wanted to be untouchable, the biggest entertainer in the world. That ambition materialized in 1982 with Thriller. No one could have predicted the cultural earthquake it would unleash. With its cinematic videos, groundbreaking choreography, and timeless tracks like Billie Jean, Beat It, and the title song Thriller, the album shattered every record in existence. It became the best-selling album of all time, a record that still stands. Michael Jackson was no longer just famous, he was a global phenomenon. Concerts turned into near-religious experiences. Fans fainted at the sight of him. Soldiers in faraway countries mimicked his dance moves. Heads of state wanted to meet him. He was no longer simply the king of pop. He was the most famous man on earth. But immense fame carried immense pressure. Every gesture, every performance had to be perfect. Michael rehearsed obsessively, demanding not just excellence, but transcendence. When I step on stage, he once said, I want to take people to another world. And he did. The moonwalk, first revealed during a 1983 television special, became more than a dance, it became a symbol of magic itself. Yet even as his star rose higher, cracks began to appear. Michael grew increasingly isolated. Fame, once a dream, began to feel like a prison. Paparazzi stalked his every move. Tabloids spun stories about him. Some true, many exaggerated. He built walls around himself, sometimes literal ones, like the gates of Neverland Ranch, his fantasy estate filled with amusement rides, a zoo, and movie theaters. It was his attempt to reclaim the childhood he never had. But that very attempt fueled public suspicion. Why would a grown man build a playground for children? Why did he seem more comfortable around them than around adults? At first, the questions were whispers, brushed aside by fans who adored him. But in time, those whispers would grow into accusations. Meanwhile, Michael's appearance began to change. His skin grew lighter, his nose thinner, his features sharper. He claimed he suffered from vitiligo, a skin condition that caused depigmentation. While medical records later supported this, the rumors were relentless. Had he tried to erase his black identity? Why was he transforming himself into someone unrecognizable? The boy from Gary was becoming a mystery, even to those who loved him most. The duality of Michael Jackson had begun. On stage, he was untouchable, an icon of perfection, a vessel of pure art. Off stage, he was fragile, lonely, and haunted. For the world, he was both angel and enigma, a superstar and a recluse. As the 1982nd closed, Michael Jackson stood at the absolute height of his power. His albums sold in the tens of millions, his tours grossed record-breaking sums, and his influence touched every corner of culture. But the very forces that lifted him to the top, his obsession with perfection, his desire for love, his endless need for escape, were already sowing the seeds of his downfall. The world saw the king of pop. But behind the curtain, Michael was beginning to slip further into isolation, into secrecy, into a reality where fame and fantasy blurred together. And soon, that world would collide with scandal. For nearly 2 decades, Michael Jackson has seemed untouchable, too big to fail, too beloved to fall. But in 1993, the first cracks became impossible to ignore. That year, a 13-year-old boy named Jordan Chandler accused Michael of sexual abuse. The accusations shook the world. For the first time, the Neverland Ranch, the whimsical amusement park Michael built as his personal refuge, was no longer seen as a fantasy land. To some, it became evidence of something sinister, a paradise designed to lure children. The media frenzy was merciless. Tabloids splashed lurid headlines across front pages. Television anchors dissected every detail of the case. Michael's career, his reputation, his very identity as the king of pop seemed to hang in the balance. He denied all allegations, insisting that his relationships with children were innocent, born from his desire to give them the childhood he never had. To his defenders, Michael was being exploited, a target for opportunists seeking money. But to critics, the allegations confirmed long-held suspicions. In 1994, the case ended in a $23 million settlement. Officially, no guilt was admitted. But to the public, the damage was irreversible. Questions lingered. Why settle if he was innocent? Michael claimed it was to protect himself and his family from endless pain, but the whispers never stopped. The years that followed grew darker. His 1,995 album history was as much a defense as it was music, his lyrics laced with anger at the media, at betrayal, at the constant suspicion he faced. Yet even as he lashed out in song, his personal life unraveled. He married Lisa Marie Presley in 1,994-inch, what some saw as a desperate attempt to normalize his image. The union lasted less than 2 years. His second marriage, to Debbie Rowe, produced 2 children, Prince and Paris, but ended in divorce as well. Meanwhile, his appearance continued to change dramatically. His skin grew paler, his nose sharper, his features almost unearthly. Each public appearance sparked new ridicule, new headlines mocking his freakish looks. Michael, once the most adored entertainer in the world, had become a punchline. Wacko Jacko, the British press sneered. The boy who craved love was now drowning in humiliation. Then, in 2003, disaster struck again. A documentary by journalist Martin Bashir, Living with Michael Jackson, aired worldwide. In it, Michael was shown holding hands with a young boy and defending the idea of sharing his bed with children. His words, intended to be innocent, sounded damning. Within weeks, prosecutors reopened investigations, and Michael was indicted on multiple counts of child molestation. The trial in 2005 was the climax of years of suspicion. For months, the world watched as witnesses testified, as prosecutors painted Michael as a manipulator who used his fame to prey on the vulnerable. The defense countered with stories of extortion and lies, portraying him as a gentle soul incapable of harming a child. Fans camped outside the courthouse, weeping and singing his songs, while critics called for his downfall. In the end, Michael Jackson was acquitted on all charges. The jury found reasonable doubt, and legally, he was innocent. But innocence in the courtroom did not restore his image in the court of public opinion. The trial left him shattered, financially drained, emotionally exhausted, and more isolated than ever. Neverland, once a sanctuary, was now tainted forever. He abandoned it, leaving behind the Ferris wheel, the zoo, the laughter of children that once filled its air. After the trial, Michael lived like a ghost of himself. He drifted between countries Bahrain, Ireland, Las Vegas, seeking refuge, but finding no peace. His finances collapsed. Debts mounted into hundreds of millions. Record sales slowed. He became a recluse, surfacing only occasionally in public, his frail frame hidden beneath masks and oversized clothing. The man who once moonwalked across stages before millions now seemed trapped in his own shadow. The price of his fame, his trauma, and his secrets had finally caught up with him. Michael Jackson was no longer just the king of pop. He was a tragic figure, a man admired and despised, defended and condemned, adored and ridiculed. And as whispers of a comeback began, so too did the toll of years of physical and emotional pain. Behind closed doors, Michael relied increasingly on powerful medications just to sleep, just to function, just to escape. He was spiraling toward an end that no one could stop. By 2009, Michael Jackson was preparing for what was meant to be a grand return. The This Is It concert series in London promised to re-establish him as the ultimate entertainer. Rehearsals were grueling. Michael at 50 demanded perfection down to every hand gesture, every spin, every note. Friends and choreographers recalled him as obsessed, exhausted, yet still magical. For those who worked with him, the spark was still there, but it came at a visible cost. Behind the scenes, Michael's health was deteriorating. Years of insomnia and chronic pain had left him dependent on prescription medications. Propofol, a powerful anesthetic, and other sedatives were used to push his body and mind through relentless rehearsal schedules. Friends pleaded with him to slow down, to rest, to seek help, but Michael, always driven by the need to perform, pressed on. On June 25, 2009, tragedy struck. In his rented Holmby Hills home, Michael Jackson suffered cardiac arrest. Attempts to revive him were futile. He was pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. The world was stunned. Across the globe, fans wept, streets emptied, televisions interrupted programming, and social media erupted in a mourning that few public figures have ever inspired. The cause of death was later ruled as acute propofol and benzodiazepine intoxication. His personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray, was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter in 2011. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, was gone. His life ended not by fame or scandal, but by the very pressures and dependencies that his fame had wrought. The reaction was immediate and intense. Fans flooded Los Angeles streets with candles, flowers, and photographs. In Neverland, the amusement rides fell silent. Concerts and tribute shows celebrated his artistry, but whispers of his troubles, his eccentricities, and his scandals persisted. Analysts debated the duality of his life, a man capable of unmatched beauty in music and dance, yet deeply flawed, deeply wounded. Posthumously, Michael's legacy became a battleground. Albums and documentaries released after his death soared to the top of the charts. His influence on pop R&B and hip-hop was undeniable, cementing his place in history as one of the most revolutionary artists of all time. Yet, allegations of abuse resurfaced in documentaries like Leaving Neverland, forcing the public to confront the uncomfortable questions that had followed him throughout his life. Was he the misunderstood angel he claimed to be, or was the monster behind the magic still lurking in the shadows? Michael Jackson's life had always been defined by extremes. He was adored and reviled, celebrated and condemned. His genius could inspire millions, yet the same genius demanded a toll that no one could fully bear. The world remembers the dazzling costumes, the gravity-defying moonwalk, the songs that transcended generations, but behind the curtain, the man was fragile, lonely, and in constant pursuit of a childhood and acceptance that he never fully possessed. And so, the story of Michael Jackson ended not in triumph, but in tragedy, a life that seemed larger than life itself, yet consumed by the pressures of fame, the scars of a lost childhood, and the consequences of secrets kept too long. His death was not just the loss of a pop icon. It was the final chapter of a story that had always been haunted by shadows. But even in death, the enigma of Michael Jackson continues to captivate the world, leaving behind a question that has never truly been answered. Was he the angel we imagined, or the monster we feared? Michael Jackson's influence on music, dance, and popular culture is immeasurable. From the moonwalk to his groundbreaking music videos, he redefined what it meant to be an entertainer. Artists across genres from Beyoncé to Justin Timberlake, from Usher to Bruno Mars, cite him as a defining inspiration. His voice, his choreography, his vision continue to shape the landscape of global pop. Yet, Michael's story is also a cautionary tale. The man who brought joy to millions lived a life marked by isolation, scrutiny, and controversy. His pursuit of perfection, his longing for a lost childhood, and the constant pressures of fame left wounds that no amount of applause could heal. Neverland, once imagined as a paradise, became a symbol of the complexities that fame imposed on innocence and trust. In the end, Michael Jackson remains an enigma, a genius, and a tragedy intertwined. The world celebrates the angelic music, the larger-than-life performances, and the moments of pure joy he gave to audiences. But it also remembers the questions, the scandals, and the shadows that followed him relentlessly. His legacy is not simple. It is a mirror reflecting both the heights of artistic achievement and the depths of human vulnerability. Michael Jackson will always be remembered as a man who soared higher than anyone else, yet whose fall reminds us that even legends carry human fragility. And so we continue to watch, to listen, to dance, and to wonder. Behind the magic, was Michael Jackson the angel we believed in, or the monster that fame created?